Hi, everyone. I am Carrie Thompson. I have the great privilege of being mayor here in Bloomington, and um, I like to try to get things started on time to respect the fact that you all are giving us your time today. Um, I am so thrilled that we are at today because Hopewell has been a project that I think a lot of Bloomington has high hopes for, but sort of hasn't known what to expect. And it certainly was a project that in the last administration took on a big vision and built up a lot of ideas in the master plan. And frankly, when I took office, I was wondering how we could fulfill a vision that was held in that master plan with the fiscal responsibility that I also know that we needed to have. And I am thrilled that we got to today. And I want to particularly thank our RDC. I know we have a few members of the RDC here today. Thank you for staying with us and for leaning into how we could make Hopewell truly work for our entire Bloomington community in a way that really leverages the kind of housing that we need for the kind of economic development that we see moving forward in our community. I also want to just say a special thank you to David Hiddle and Anna Killian Hansen and Andrew Cybor. I don't know if you're in here, all of whom have been working hard with their departments to get to a Hopewell that really works for our community. I ran on a platform of housing, and that is why I am here today. Housing has, since the moment I moved to Bloomington and still today, housing has been a conundrum for Bloomington. We have been the least affordable place to live in the state of Indiana. And my commitment when we were looking at Hopewell is how do we make Hopewell a community that really attracts the people that work in Bloomington in a way that they can afford to live in Bloomington. Because we simply can't grow a local economy without the key components of housing. Hopewell represents what can happen when a community truly decides to invest in itself. When we take a site that once served one purpose as our hospital and turn it into a place that serves many. We'll have homes of all shapes and sizes. We'll give you a preview of that in a few minutes. We will have homes for every stage of life. And particularly, we want Hopewell to be a place that really calls in the young professionals who many times cannot find a place to live in the city of Bloomington. There'll be places where businesses can grow. And of course, we have an incredible park right in Hopewell, as well as two other parks adjacent to Hopewell, which are designed for that community connection that we all need. To take a hard look at our own processes through the Hopewell lens, and make a test case for building more inclusively and a set of new standards for Bloomington. We are really looking hard at Hopewell to make sure that we are figuring out the bumps in the road that happen when you're trying to develop a plat for a new neighborhood all the way through permitting. It's my commitment during this term that we will get to a more streamlined permitting process, and we will have a predictable planning process. So people know what they're getting into when they decide to build in Bloomington, because we want this kind of housing in Bloomington, and we want our developers to know transparently what it will take in order to build homes in Bloomington. The city obviously can build a framework to get housing built, but it's the individuals and businesses in this room that will make it real. And one of the driving forces behind how we are pivoting Hopewell for our community is to turn Hopewell into a development that our local builders and developers can invest in, can participate in, and can build for our local folks who are in need of housing. And for those who are at the university now and will be graduating and we want to keep here, for those who are coming to the businesses that we are growing at the Trades District and beyond, we need houses for those people. And Hopewell is the place that we hope our local builders will be creating those homes. Our work at the city, of course, is always about people first. Hopewell reflects input from residents, from designers, and from developers. This is what leadership looks like when people listen. Hopewell will embody our values of sustainability, inclusion, and connection, and we will do it in a way that removes as much red tape as possible so we can get to the efficiency that our housing system really needs. And we have been really privileged to be led through this stage of the process by Allie Quinlan Thurman, who is online with us today. Allie leads the team at Flintlock Labs, who has developed the plans that you'll see today and the proposals that we'll go over with you throughout the rest of the afternoon. I'll turn it over to Allie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for having us. We're really excited to run through the work that we've been doing on Hopewell, and really excited to get your feedback as well. So we'll do a little bit of an intro of the project and where we are so far, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. So we've been tagging this as a homes catalog, so housing options made easy, as a little bit of a background and an introduction for those of you that I haven't had the pleasure to meet yet. I'm based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm a licensed architect and a licensed landscape architect. I also am a small developer, so we build this work in our own neighborhood sort of as R&D, and have been for about 10 years. And then I'm also a former planning commissioner here in my own hometown, which has given us a really good broad view of how challenging housing can be to get on the ground. We've been working through pre-approved plans programs as a solution for housing in a lot of communities since 2017, our first program there. And I love to echo the comments here too, that this is really a people first approach, that this is not about real estate development as much as it is providing housing and community for the people who will live here. So our team is 3 small companies, or a big team of small businesses. So Flintlock Lab is our architecture, landscape, and building practice here in Fayetteville, Arkansas. The Incremental Development Alliance is a national nonprofit that I'm a longtime faculty member of, and have been serving as executive director for a few years. We'll be providing training and capacity building for locals to build these as part of the program. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. And then Kronberg Urbanists and Architects is one of our partner companies, another INCDEV faculty member. Eric is also an architect, planner, and small developer in Atlanta. And so we work really aligned and do a lot of these plans programs together because our catalogs give really good breadth of size and approach within the programs. So we've got a team here in Fayetteville. One thing that's been really interesting working through the program here in Bloomington is how similar our cities are. So we're almost exactly the same population, also the home of our state's largest university. We also have a lot of experience really struggling with knowing how to balance the needs of the university and student housing with the needs of year-round residents, and converting those students into year-round residents at graduation. And so we've had a lot of geographic similarities and code similarities too, that we've really been enjoying the experience of working in Bloomington. Kronberg, as I mentioned, is based in Atlanta. They also bring a lot of planning and code support to our team, as that's really their specialty. And then INCDEV is really all about helping locals strengthen their own neighborhoods. INCDEV is a national nonprofit, as I mentioned, that is 10 years old this year. It's trained almost 10,000 small developers nationally and in places like South Bend, one of the longest running places that they've been working. The pre-approved plans program there in South Bend came out of stress tests that were done by INCDEV. And it really is an alliance of practitioners. It's very practicality based and will provide capacity building and really hands-on training from everything from finance to construction detailing, supporting the developers of these houses all the way from start to finish. We are a really diverse team, and part of the reason that we, again, want you to think about that is that this is how many specialties it takes to get even small, simple houses built in communities in the United States these days. building codes, zoning codes, processes, finance. There are a number of reasons that it's really hard to do this kind of work. And so you're not alone in struggling with housing that's the right size, in the right place, at the right price point to be able to support people living the kind of lives that they want to live. This is really hard work, and I want to reinforce that you guys are already really far ahead of most communities that we work in a lot of the work that has been done. And as mentioned, we're still having to calibrate even with all of that good work, and that is a sign of a successful system in our experience. We've never worked someplace that didn't have new things that we needed to take a look at, and really looking at this as a practice of getting closer has been something that we found at least helps people feel better about, we'll never hit perfection. Pre-approved plans programs are something that we've been working on for almost 10 years as a really good framework for getting housing. And while Hopewell is not a full pre-approved citywide program, the way that we might typically see one run, we are really approaching this as delivering fully pre-approved buildings on platted lots with utility connections that are ready to go pull a permit for somebody. We also have been calibrating the program to be able to be rolled into a citywide pre-approved program in the future, which really means that we're trying to calibrate plan selections and dimensions to currently platted lot sizes and standards throughout the city. One of the reasons we really took this approach from the beginning is that even if we build out Hopewell exactly as drawn in our best case scenario, and we've got people moving in, and it is a full win for this one site, we will not have solved the housing crisis. And so we really are trying to do what I think is really a dual mandate here, that we're really championing, that is building Hopewell out and also capacity building locals so that we can build housing long term that is calibrated to Bloomington's need well past the full successful build out of Hopewell. The use of kind of stock plans or standardized plans that get repeated multiple times within neighborhoods has a huge history in the United States. There are many places that have adopted pre-approved catalogs. There are several in Indiana, and it's been interesting too. We've done lots of Indiana work in the last few years. We've worked on regional projects in southern Indiana and the Indiana uplands. We've done developer trainings in Indianapolis last year, and then we've got our long-term work in South Bend we talked about. We're also kicking off one of these programs in Fort Wayne coming up. You guys are doing lots of work statewide. Plans catalogs and Sears kit homes and pattern books, as they were sometimes called, really were the way that most of our historic neighborhoods were built out. And so a lot of these catalogs have a really good history and proven track record of being great ways that we can build neighborhoods full of personality, that are homes that people can really build out and customize through time. But it can be a very efficient way to build out a neighborhood rather than feeling like every home needs to be fully custom, fully designed for its own independent lot. Pre-approved plans programs as an approach have really taken off nationwide. They started with ADU plans as an approach, especially the West Coast had several big state bills that were passed legalizing this kind of program. But a number of cities nationally have adopted these and seen really good success in starting to see redevelopment of types of housing that the market is not typically producing. So a couple of things that we're trying to do with this kind of program. One of them is expedite development processes. Often this is a really great way that the city is functionally acting as a small developer, taking a project through its own system and flagging friction points that the city can make a decision they are feeling like is adding to the quality you're getting, sometimes is not adding to the quality you're getting. And so it's really common to have sort of a development process, stress test calibration that comes out of this. We're also trying to reduce development costs. A lot of times that extra process, that extra time, that extra complexity is raising the bar so that really only out-of-state developers with big legal teams and lots of consultants can successfully develop within the system. Often that's reducing the lovability of buildings that we're getting. And it's also really giving you more of a standard product of housing rather than something that's calibrated for your neighborhoods, your residents. So shifting into a lower bar for entry with more clear standards, which can be achieved via a pre-approved program, can help create local wealth, that these are being built by, owned by locals, and that you're not exporting wealth out to out-of-town developers. It also helps develop better built outcomes. We're not trying to zone for good architecture via really complicated zoning patterns and architectural design controls that then need review boards. Instead, we're developing good built outcomes that the city's selecting the architecture, selecting the details from the beginning so that you know what you're getting. It also helps reintroduce a greater variety of housing options, which I think is one of the most useful things that, kind of about this program. A lot of builders can build what they're familiar with, because that's a safer path to take, and development is a really risky business. We see that as a really rational decision, but often by reintroducing different types of really desirable housing that aren't commonly being built, we can also get the private market more familiar and comfortable with those, and then start to see a broader range of housing types be built. One of the things that we talk about the most in terms of those wider range of housing types is who we're trying to house. One of the things, this is the most important, I think, set of data that we present, we talk about it a lot. Often when we start talking housing, people have an assumption, whether they realize it or not, we usually do, that we're talking about, right, this young family, 2.5 kids and a dog, really specific kind of household type. As the most common, owners of homes. That is not statistically where we sit in the United States or in Bloomington. Our most common household type across the US, and there locally, the local stats match the national ones almost exactly. The most common household type, almost half of households, are two people with no kids. Either that is empty nesters, your kids are only there for a little while. You have a long time as adults with that house. Couples who haven't had kids, or couples who haven't had kids yet. But almost half of our households are two people sleeping in one bed at night. The next most common household is one person living alone. That is the fastest growing household type. Typically, anytime that people can afford to live alone, they do. And so that's a really fast growing demographic in the United States. Those two household types combined are about 75% of households. About 3/4 of households are one or two people living often in one bed at night. So as we start to think about the most common size and format of house, it becomes really clear very quickly why housing is typically too large, too expensive, and too far apart to fit the majority of the households that we actually need to be focusing on housing. This is also challenging for that minority of households that have kids in them, because we often end up with small households that have enough budget to buy a larger house, and they have no other option. While they might prefer a smaller house that might be a little bit lower maintenance, might be less expensive, often they can stay in a big house, right? Empty nesters who don't downsize because they have nowhere to go. So they end up, sort of taking up a house that could be a great family house if we were providing a more diverse set of housing that's better suited to those small households. And as you can see here, kind of if we look at the flip of this, the size of our houses that we have right now, about 62% of them have 3 or more bedrooms. And so when we talk about having lots of large houses, but still feeling that crunch for young families, that's really what's going on. We've got smaller households that are in larger homes than they need or want, because we have provided very few small homes. One of the reasons we're going to talk about there is lot size. Lot size requirements have a lot to do with that across the United States. One of the things that's really challenging, and you may be experiencing this and it may not feel housing related, but it is, as you are working through budget conversations, the format that we have for a lot of our neighborhoods, that we can only build single family houses and they have to be on relatively large lots, means that we have quite a bit of infrastructure and service needs that are being provided by very few taxpayers in very few houses, right? In this situation, which is sort of default normal under zoning in most of the United States, even, if you start to make one of those a duplex, you have very few units that are available, and there's very little diversity available in that house. So we talk about this as housing, that instead we want to focus on getting both more ratepayers in on the same amount of infrastructure so that city budgets are significantly better balanced. But we also want to see this as a people first kind of approach. This does work better financially, but it also starts to provide housing choice. That we can live in the same neighborhood for our entire life cycle. We have a wide range of housing types, housing sizes, housing budgets. That we can live within the place that we want to live, that's close to the coffee shop that we like, that's walkable to work. And we can live there with neighbors who also have a wide variety of choice within their housing. And so as we start to talk through some of the changes we're going to be making, I want you to think back to kind of this graphic, right? Of if we don't have a wide variety of housing relatively close together, we're both worse off for city budgets. And we also have a number of people that end up pushed to outer edges of town because that's the only place they can find a house. Bloomington is, like many places, and I think more so than many places, really seeing, suffering from popularity and success, right? There's a huge population growth within the city within the last 20 years and projected to continue to grow significantly. As we think about that household size going down, right? Remember how small our average household size is? This is one thing we want to think about too. When in the year 2000, our population, right, was significantly smaller than it is now, we also had a larger average household size. The average household size is going down steadily every year, which means that we need more total units to house the same number of people as more and more people want to live alone. So we're really working against two different challenges here. Population growth is definitely a challenge. We definitely need more housing to house new residents that are moving in or staying after college. We also have to be focusing on housing increasing numbers of individuals or couples living in homes. One of the other things we really flagged here that's very specific about this program is the need to be promoting home ownership. We've got a really high rental rate, which is often a sign that we don't have a balanced set of housing, that we've got lots of rentals available, lots of people who own homes but don't want to sell them. And we really need to be providing that pathway into home ownership as part of this program. From a cost standpoint, we actually are at a somewhat unusual cost focus. One of the things that we often have found in communities like Bloomington, who do have really successful professionals, is that one of the challenges that we often see too is that when we aren't providing a wide range of price points, we both need hyper affordable, very attainable price points. We do also need some nicer homes. One of the things that we see happen sometimes is that we'll have naturally occurring, is what that's called, naturally occurring existing homes that are relatively affordable by virtue of being smaller and older, not fully improved. In communities that we're not providing the full range of price points, we often also see wealthier professionals purchase small, affordable homes and then renovate them, add on, tear them down, build a large house. And we're losing that attainable housing that we already have, which is very hard to recreate, partially because we're not providing any higher end housing. So I also want to flag in your brains, we do need really attainable housing. There are really good affordability metrics as part of this program. A couple of more expensive models that are great for professionals who are kind of mid-career can also actually help save some of our existing attainable housing. So that diversity of price point is also really important to match the diversity of incomes that we see in Bloomington. As we look at the Hopewell Master Plan, we're here in blocks 9 and 10. And so sort of, settling you in terms of what we're going to be looking at in this first section, we're blocks 9 and 10 down in the southwest corner. And we'll run through a quick case study too of another home catalog that is in process as an example of the calibrations that happen to solve the really specific challenges of any community's individual housing. One of the things that we want to talk about again through this housing choice is the wide variety of what we would call house scaled buildings, that we can get quite a variety of unit types and unit sizes that all play really nicely together. Everything from small missing middle apartment buildings down to really small micro units that hit great affordability metrics. So this is the rough selection of building types that you might see in a catalog that even, this goes up to a 10-plex. There's a 4-plex, 6-plex, and 10-plex in this one, as well as some little micro units, right? So the Daffodil is a 16 by 22 studio unit that is built and sold for sale. So a pretty wide range of unit types. And then another element that you're going to see tucked into here is the need for kind of two things that we'll be talking through as part of this. One of them is small lots. I mentioned lot size is partially what's driving our affordability issues in a lot of the United States. If you think about a rough metric that lots of developers use is that your land cost should be no more than 20% of the total sales value of your eventual house. If you're going to buy a lot, you can't really sell a house on it for less than, right, about 80%, more than that lot cost. So as we start to look at lot sizes, and this is a case study that is done on Kronberg's work, this is an actual built for a nonprofit project in Atlanta originally, but the numbers have been calibrated to Bloomington current year costs. So if we look at our small, 3-bedroom single family home on a normal size lot, we can get to decent AMI. So, your area median income, a person making the average amount of income within your town 100% AMI. So somebody making 130% AMI is someone who is slightly more successful, making slightly more than average. 130 for new construction is actually pretty good metrics. But one of the things that we see here too is the down payments on these can be somewhat limiting. So we can, and in this scheme, they could get to a decent affordability success rate with just a single small family house as an infill. But as we start to see ADUs legalized in lots of communities, we can get down to a really good affordability for the rental of that ADU. But look at how much the down payment of this house has jumped, right? So we're at $25,000 that somebody needs in cash to be able to buy this house. In order to buy an accessory dwelling unit, here's the challenge we found with accessory dwelling units. As somebody who's written a lot of ADU codes and loves ADUs, the challenge is you're buying two houses, in a package of one. There are some people who can afford two houses. There are some people who cannot. So one of the things that we find really impressive is that if we let homeowners split that accessory dwelling unit off and sell it separately, we can capture both the real affordability benefit of the small unit, which is why it's so affordable for rental, is because it's very small. And also we can lower our down payment rate. So, if we can build the ADU, great, we've got another unit, we're housing another resident at an affordable rate, but it's pretty expensive for somebody to be able to buy, which means it's pretty hard to resell. If we can split the lot once and build two more ADUs, we can get that down payment down a little bit, but we're really still paying for both of those houses. And the down payment on these is also really high. We need $50,000 to $70,000 in down payment. So limiting our number of buyers. Although our house then price points, the price to own is pretty attainable, right? We see these affordability rates keep coming down the more houses that we can build. But in our scenario 4 here, where we've allowed these units to all be built and then allowed them to each be split out onto their own lot, we start to see down payments that are down in the $12,000 to $20,000 range, and we're hitting a 70 to 120% AMI for home ownership. So home ownership is also really promoted anytime we can split very small houses out on their own lots. They can be purchased with a regular mortgage from the bank downtown. So as we talk about small lots, this has been one of the easiest ways we've found to sort of describe. There's the two-part that we're really working on, that monthly cost to own, but also your down payment approaches. So the approach that we take with this is that we'll have a user-friendly catalog that is, all the details of each home, the overall dimensions, overall price points even, and then also full buildable construction documents that are fully pre-permitted through the city office. And then there's also a program guide to help guide people through how they build, what is exactly the process, who do they call next. And then this recommendations for the program is something else that we can talk through a little bit. Any that we find in code that is helpful to make updates to get better yield. One of the things that we really want to focus on is matching the historic character and scale of a lot of our neighborhoods. And so we see lots of cottages, we see lots of small format plans, but we also see lots of opportunity for some two-story units that can really make good, efficient use of the additional foundation costs that we need anytime we're building on karst or clay, as we are in Bloomington and as we do at home. So as we look through kind of this first round of proposals, we're proposing putting forward a real mix of housing types and price points, fully pre-approved home designs that will streamline permitting and reduce costs for builders. They'll also reduce the unknowns for small developers, which, unknown amount of time that it's going to take to work through pre-development and get to groundbreaking can cause a lot of heartache for small developers who don't have, an enormous balance sheet behind them. That extra time is real extra cost for them. We really want to build this out as a local opportunity for local builders. And so we would not necessarily envision that these would be built individually home by different builders, often on small sites that can be challenging. But the price points of these, the goal would be that people can easily take on 3 to 5, if not built concurrently, then, sort of lots together that they can be strategizing and building with lots of support through the process. We'll also be working through with RDC legal frameworks to support permanently affordable and market rate homes. There is a challenge with some of these that the first time that we build a home, we often can get to really good affordability metrics. Often then they're in such good locations, they're small enough that we get really big bidding wars on those units for resale. And so we've seen several instances without a legal framework of sort of affordability protections, that the first home buyer gets a phenomenal subsidy, gets a house, well below kind of the federal standard definitions of affordable. And then in a couple of years of living in it, they can turn around and sell it for double what they paid for it, which is a great income piece for them, not great for long-term affordability. So we'll be working through a permanent legal structure that the homes will be allowed to build equity in them. Each home buyer can build some equity in that house, but also that we can control overall price points and resale long-term to maintain the benefit. We'll have ongoing community outreach as well as developer training. We're starting now our engagement with local developers and local lenders. Finance is also a big hang up that we often run into for these, so they'll also be calibrated for local finance. And here's where we are in the overall project. So we've really wrapped up our discovery phase, kind of research, getting used to the real specifics of Bloomington and how this can be most impactful citywide. We're working on our detailed land planning now with neighbors, partners, and city departments. We'll then work through the plat and entitlement process to be able to hopefully pass a PUD on these two blocks. Block 8, which the police department will go on, will be part of that PUD. There are 8 and 9 are one block right now. So we'll plat those together. And then we'll work through starting to recruit developers and lenders as part of the feedback group, as well as, assess interest of people who may be interested in building these. And then we'll have some citywide trainings talking about incremental development and how that works both for professionals and non-professionals. We find one of the things that's really important on these programs is ecosystem training. That housing is not built in a vacuum. Our planners and our fire marshals and our city officials and our lenders and our housing advocates are just as important to have on board and understanding and pulling in the same direction as the builders themselves. So as we've worked through quite a bit of calibration into Bloomington itself, really trying to focus again on being able to have this roll out into a full pre-approved program. One of the things that we wanted to show, and one of the kind of background of one of the biggest things that we'll be asking for, is looking at one thing that is really unique about Bloomington and the way that the lots are platted. In a lot of neighborhoods, and this is a specific case study of a specific existing block. This is right next to Rose Hill Cemetery. They're on Elm and 4th. You have many blocks, which this is really interesting. We hadn't seen this before, that have side driveway alleys platted, as well as platted rear unbuilt alleys. So we have lots of unbuilt, what we would call a paper alley. It exists only on paper. It has never been built. But we also have very deep lots, relative to most similar sized cities that were developed at similar times. There's very, very large lots. One of the things that this is leading to is the feeling, I think, for a lot of Bloomington residents, that there is nowhere to infill. As you drive or walk down 3rd Street or 4th Street, there are no vacant lots. You have a full built out street of homes that you were seeing, and short of removing homes, there's no way to infill any additional area. One of the things that we're looking at, though, and have looked at in several communities, is legalizing the ability to use that alley as legal street frontage. That's something that is one of the, probably the last 5 years, one of the most popular code changes that we're seeing. Can lead to the ability to infill our backyards, land that does not currently feel like it's developable because it's not very visible from the street. But the lots in a lot of these neighborhoods are so deep that they would be a typical urban, depth lot, an in a town of about your size lot, even with a small lot carved out in the back. One of the things that we've seen be really beneficial in some communities for this is that you get a whole second street frontage. You can double the number of units within your neighborhood block. It's entirely voluntary, because if you don't want anything built on your backyard, great, you don't have to. But it does also allow for the creation of significantly more attainable housing while preserving existing historic fabric. On very little additional infrastructure maintenance cost for the city, because an alley as a frontage is much cheaper to maintain than a full 60-foot right-of-way. One of the things that we also see as a real benefit to this is that through a code change only, just legalizing alleys as frontage and then legalizing lot splits. And we understand there's lots of controls that will likely want to be put on that to make sure that we don't have, again, sort of out-of-town developers taking advantage of that. All achievable. One of the things that we see as a huge benefit to this is additional land in your backyard that is not buildable doesn't really have any value to it. You can't sell it, you can't borrow on it, you couldn't fix up your house with, a home equity line of credit using that as value. The ability to split those lots out, though, creates legal buildable lots, which have a value both for homeowners. They can stay in their home, they don't have to downsize, they can pull some equity out of that by selling a rear lot to a new resident. or they can borrow on the value of that lot as a home equity line of credit or a refinance to improve their own home. So the rough numbers on these, and we pulled general lot values in Bloomington to run these comps, but just by that one legal code change, allowing alleys as lot frontage, we can create 20 new lots in town in a new neighborhood, 20 new dwelling units if these were all single family cottages. And we've also created almost $1 million in lot value only by allowing those to be legal lots. So one of the things that we'll talk about a lot is alley frontage and small lots throughout our code change recommendations. And as we do some of these things, I think it's helpful to return to what are we trying to achieve? One of the things that we really want to be able to achieve is the historic village. The parts of town that we love the most, right? And we put on the postcard are often relatively dense, relatively mixed use. Sometimes that's office, sometimes that is little shops. But the ability to have everything that you need within walking or biking distance to your own neighborhood. And here's an example of a neighborhood that Kronberg self-developed. This is behind Eric's house in Atlanta that has an alley as frontage. There are not sidewalks, but it's such a small street that residents walk and play in that street. There's often kids on bikes there when I have been there visiting Eric. Some of the products that Eric and I have developed here, really small houses ranging from 500 square feet in the bottom left up to 2,000 square feet. One of our family houses that's tucked into the neighborhood with that cute wraparound porch there on the north. Both of these incorporate alley frontage, kind of the front of your lot, your front door facing an alley, sometimes where they're even facing green spaces. So pocket neighborhoods or green space facing lots are another really useful component that this legalizes, and it means we can do cottage courts, pocket neighborhoods without needing a condo association, that the alley in the back is your frontage, although your front door might be facing a park or a trail. We talked a little bit about reintroducing housing types, but this is another of the kind of elements that we used within our Massachusetts program recently to show the wide range of housing types that we typically weren't seeing being produced by the market, that with pre-approved plans, we could reintroduce and really create some additional diversity within the program. What might this look like conceptually, specifically in Hopewell? We started out with this first concept plan as a point of discussion. One of the things that we've really been working through is how wide street rights of way should be. What are those street sections? What should those look like? And so this was our first element. And I want you guys to pay a little bit of attention here to our yields at the bottom. So this is 118 units. We've got a finished lot value that we've created from this, again, taking an average of lot values that are for sale currently in Bloomington, assuming that these are a little cheaper because they're a little smaller, but that there's also a range of values within this. We've got home prices within this initial plan from $175,000 up to $676,000. So the median price here is about $290,000. So really hitting that young professional kind of price point that we're aiming for. The mortgage payment on that is similar to renting an apartment, which is also often a good metric of affordability for that kind of market segment. Flagging, we had not widened Fairview, which was a little bit of a flag, and we did have some multifamily mixed into the inner blocks. So we explored some alternatives, and this is sort of the yield impact that can have seemingly minor changes. So this one widened Fairview. So this gives us a full 60-foot right-of-way. We minimized the number of lots that faced onto an alley directly. So these have an alley rear frontage, but a trail as their front face through an old alley. There's a 12-foot alley easement. So we're using that as a trail easement and then building out a full alley that can be used for fire access and utilities. So this dropped us to 84 homes. So it's about 30% less units. Our finished lot value dropped about 30%. And our home prices, our average went up a little because we were losing some of those smallest units and we lost kind of the multifamily units, which brought our price points down a little, but we still maintain that, 200,000 to 676 rough price point. The largest, most expensive houses are our corner units where we've got some 3-bedroom family houses. They've got a playroom and a decent sized laundry, the kind of home that you can easily, purchase either with kids or knowing that that's going to be important to you. And then we also have some really small studio duplexes and really attainable units for single person households. And I wanted to show too, if this is helpful, as we're bringing through some of our code changes in our PUD, this is our current by right. We want to call out really clearly, R4 is actually a great zone. You guys have done great zoning work already. The TRO is a great zone. And here's our current yield that we can do within the R4. And this is partially due to how deep our lots are, in town, right? So this is a larger lot than is required for minimum lot size. But because we've got a minimum lot width, we can't actually use this back space for anything because we don't have a street back here and there's not really a way to put one in. So we end up with lots of extra space that isn't necessarily buildable. But under current by right development, we can fit 28 homes, right? So about 3/4 less than we're proposing doing with a couple of these code changes. So we thought this might be helpful to also see just relative to the background of why we're trying to ask for some of these. So we have plenty of time for questions. We can go back to any slides that we need to for discussion, but I also would encourage you guys to reach out to us now or throughout the process. We'd love this to be a really engaged and informed program. And so any feedback that you've got for us now or in the future, any recommendations you have for us of builders, locals, sometimes general contractors who are doing residential building can be scaled up to great small developers. We'd love those introductions. So I will pass it to Anna to manage Q&A in the room.
We do not have a great way to mic you all for questions unless you come up to the podium and speak, so people online, and we do have quite a number of them, can hear the question. So can I just ask if you have a question to ask if you come up to the microphone? Now is a great time to do that. Come on up, Bill.
I'll break the ice. I'm Phil Stafford, and you were talking a lot about how many people are living alone these days, and that's a significant demographic change. But much of that demographic change is driven by the aging of our population. Significant amount of that. Something like 1/3 of the population in West Side neighborhoods west of the Beeline Trail are 30% are people. Those people are living alone. Another 30% are people over the age of 50. And so what I was looking for in the presentation was some reference to aging in place through universal design and other kinds of community supports that help people accomplish that. But what I heard was a more transitory environment where people can build up some quick equity and then resell their property, which seems to me would be a detriment if we're trying to also build community with this neighborhood as well.
I can hop in and take some ownership of having explained that poorly. There is an accessibility percentage that will be insured in a lot of these. And one of the largest buyer groups that we do see of these homes is seniors who are wanting to stay within their own neighborhood, have lived in the neighborhood for, the majority of their life, are in a larger house than they really want, and would like to be able to downsize but stay within the neighborhood. And so there will be, I think it's likely a minimum of between 30 and 40% of the units that will be fully adaptable for age in place wheelchair accessibility. But there is also a real focus within the program of the ability to have those units be very flexible to a wide range of ages, but that seniors are a really important buyer group. So I apologize for not talking about that nearly enough.
Just add on, because now seems like an opportune time, Allie. The population slide that was shown really was where we aspired to be. Several years ago when the master plan was developed, we were aspiring to have population growth. That hasn't happened, actually, perhaps because we don't have enough housing. And we do want people to stay in neighborhoods, obviously, and build that neighborhood connection. And what is happening now is people are staying in homes that are much larger than what they want to stay in. They want to stay in the community, but they may not be able to maintain the home that they have, or may not want to. My family is a great example. We at one time had 5 kids at home. We only have 2 now, and in 3 years we'll have none. So we don't need the same size house. Hopefully in 3 years we'll have none. But we'd love to stay obviously in Bloomington and close to the neighborhood we're in now. And this allows some movement in the market. And right now, there isn't much. Come on up for the next question.
Let me also say that if you are online and you have a question, please drop it in the chat or raise your hand.
There were two things that jumped out at me regarding the obstacles to this kind of stuff besides zoning, and that's the fire marshal. Currently, we have historic neighborhoods that we all love and we've protected that we are not allowed to build. We have houses off 8-foot alleys currently in these neighborhoods. We're not allowed to do that anymore. So the fire marshal is one obstacle for this regarding infill. How do we get past that? It's a question. And then the second thing is also the fire marshal. And one of those slides you showed is stack the duplex. You can't stack residences anymore without a full fire suppression system. Riser, vault, post-indicator valve, which is outrageously expensive. Yet they're all over our community right now with no fire suppression. So that's my question is how do we go back to the things we love and we're protecting with all of these onerous, egregious codes that really don't really amount to much when it comes to affordability. It just drives up cost.
That is an excellent question and something that we really struggle with in a lot of different locations. And I'll give you the two-part answer. Part one is everything that we propose will be fully compliant with current fire codes. So we've got a 20-foot wide fire access route. The alleys are built at 20-foot width for a fire truck. We've got a maximum of 150-foot fire hose pull to, every unit. All of our eaves are below 30 feet in height so that we don't need aerial access, the larger ladder trucks, which has a wider requirement. And then we use a limited amount of attached dwellings. Townhouses are a better, townhouses are sort of the secret hack for fire code right now because the fire separation wall that is horizontal between them. The units are between two vertical walls. You don't have any horizontal separations. It's a cheaper detail to build. It's much easier to get done. Lots of more residential contractors can achieve those details. And so townhouses really help us get the density that we're looking for with achievable fire separations. I will say almost every state that we have done a pre-approved program in, we have ended up really attempting to and sometimes successfully making amendments to the state fire code, depending on your local representation. We have had we've had successful bills in Tennessee, North Carolina, New Hampshire. We took through state bills in Oklahoma and Arkansas last year, which our first time through usually doesn't work. So we got our first ones in. We'll be reintroducing bills there. But advocacy for building code changes is an absolutely critical component of affordable housing because exactly as you're saying, lots of the things that we love and know work and have had in our communities is phenomenal, high value, high desirability housing for 100 years are not legal to build under current building code. And so we see a huge cost to that literally and figuratively in successfully deploying housing in communities. So if you're interested in know a state senator, a state representative, we've got some really good model bills that we'd love to help with.
Hi, Allie. My name is Eric Spoonmore. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce here in Bloomington. You had mentioned that there was a mechanism, a legal mechanism, I think, that would prevent the potential for large capital gains of people that might sell a house after 2 or 3 years when they first bought it. I'm curious how that works, if there's other communities that are doing that. And then would that be legal to do in Indiana, or is there special legislation that we would need to have in order to make that happen? And then are there any tax implications, property tax revenue implications to that, as we're kind of on a market-based system here in Indiana? Would that limit our ability to generate the necessary tax revenue that we need to provide services?
It's a really common mechanism that is becoming mandatory in lots of communities. I'll give some examples of a land trust is often the format that it takes, but you need an entity that is holding kind of the protections. And so functionally what is often happening, whether it's via a land trust or whether it's via another mechanism or another holder of that, is that there's a deed restriction on the home, that there's a right of first refusal that is held by an entity. Sometimes it's the land trust, it could be the RDC, it could be the city. There's a right of first refusal to purchase that home at a pre-agreed upon appreciation rate. If we have a long-term home buyer, this becomes not very important, but the protections are actually there to prevent people from buying the house, sitting in it for a few years, selling it, and then, the house is doubled in price. And so the first right of refusal means that there's an annual pre-agreed upon appreciation that you know that you will get when you're ready to sell your house. When you're ready to sell your house, the holding entity of that protection has a qualified list of home buyers that they can bring in to purchase the house. The house is typically sold then below what the market rate might be. It's generally a capped, right? So in some communities, it's 5% annually. In some communities that have, there are communities that your annual housing appreciation is actually 30%. And so a 10 or 15% cap is actually much, well below market rate, but still a great return. So we're trying to balance that, home buying, especially really affordable units, is an important way that households are growing wealth, especially in our deeply affordable units. And so some equity growth is valuable. You don't want units doubling in value and now they're not affordable anymore. And so it's really trying to balance the needs of the affordability metric and the needs of the home buyer. But that has typically been a mechanism that's really popular and has worked really well and been really maintainable. It also means that the structure of that deed restriction, it's the most popular way to do it because if the entity that's holding that deed restriction is not able to exercise their first right of refusal, the home can then be sold at market rate, which means that you don't really see the same reduction in appraised value or assessed value that you would in more stringent, if it's a deed restricted that you can only sell that house to somebody with a specific income. There's a deed restriction program right now in Colorado that's really unique that you have to, in order to inhabit these houses that are being built under this program, you have to work a minimum of 30 hours a week in the community and make a certain income. We do see some hit on tax value and assessed value of those homes because they can't be sold at market rate. The deed restriction program has worked really well in a lot of communities because they could be sold at market rate. They're just part of a program, but they could roll out of it at any time. So they're typically not taxed at a lower value than they would be otherwise. We don't see a lot of property tax negative impacts. One of the things about the higher density too that we're really seeing is we actually see significantly higher tax revenue from blocks that are developed at this kind of a density. While each person's property taxes stay relatively approachable because their house value is small, right? You're buying a $200,000 house, your property tax rate is pretty attainable at that price point. But you have so many more houses, right? In this one, we have 4 times the number of individual dwelling units. And so our overall assessed value that we're taxing on is significantly higher than neighborhoods that have larger lots and fewer homes, but each person's taxes are lower. And so it works out really well economically for both homeowners and the city typically.
We have a couple of questions online. Let's start first with Mark Fig. I love the idea of changing codes to allow more use in existing neighborhoods. How would you handle very common private restrictions?
I'm going to ask Mark too for a clarification on private restrictions. I'm reading and interpreting that as deed restrictions that already exist on the neighborhood. Some subdivisions have restrictions that are, you can only build a house of a certain size, or your lot has to be a certain size that can overrule the city. There can be a wide variety of what people mean from that though too, because there are some neighborhoods that have restrictive covenants that have been struck down in court, as being discriminatory, or there's a wide variety of what we might mean when we say private restrictions. So I'll also ask if possible for a clarification in the remark.
I'm just speaking about private restrictions against multiple units on one lot and things of that nature that limit the ideas that densify.
Typically, if we are able to get legal lot frontage and you can legally split a lot, then we can sort of, we can still be in compliance with those private restrictions because there is only one dwelling unit per lot. You've just created an additional lot in the back. And so there are a lot of communities where it can't, both things can work. One of the other things that we see as being really important is that not every neighborhood, not every set of neighbors, not every block is going to want to have infill in the back. And so one of the big benefits of legalizing these things is that we're allowing people to do it if they want to. There are no requirements to do so. And so blocks that, or neighborhoods that want to keep the same density, keep the same look, can do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to in person and then online.
Thanks so much. My name is Jen Pearl, and I'm with the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation. And thanks so much for the really great presentation. It's exciting to see what's possible. My question is about opportunity zones or any other federal programs or state programs that could be leveraged to help with affordability and development in these areas.
That's a great question. This section of Hopewell, we believe, is in an opportunity zone. And so working through finance with the developers of the program will be something that we're working through. An opportunity zone fund is somewhat complex on a lot by lot element. So that's one of the things that is in our developer lender feedback scope, is to do some exploratory work on whether or not an opportunity zone fund that is over the entire set of 2 blocks could be a great way to have people able to invest in, functionally a rolling construction equity loan that could then be used for multiple small developers within the same within the blocks. So there are several kind of creative financing piece. I know we've got John Zodi from CDFI Friendly on today. We'll be talking CDFI funding too, but there's quite a few creative financing mechanisms that are going to be explored for this to figure out the best way to get these deployed.
Okay, we have another comment online from Richard Lewis, acknowledging that the Hopewell neighborhood offers opportunities that the previously built older core neighborhoods may not, fire safety, alley width, et cetera. Is there a thought to adjusting the code just to Hopewell for starters as sort of a building lab, and then possibly spreading code changes outward from there that may better reflect the reality of the existing right-of-ways in the older neighborhoods? Is it possible to adopt code changes just to a single area like that?
That's also a great question, and that is the way that we are currently planning to tackle the code changes. There are several other blocks in Hopewell that are under the TRO zoning type, and so we actually also have 2 zoning types that are within the area. So this first set of blocks, with it's blocks 8, 9, and 10. Let me come back up to our lot map so we can see which ones those are. So 8, 9, and 10 will be entitled under a PUD, so a planned unit development, that will be a specific set of code overlay for just these blocks. That will let us test and calibrate what we think the code changes need to be, but then also get another round of testing those on the ground to see, did we miss anything? Do we have something that went too far? Let us really controlled way be able to calibrate and know that if there are wider zoning changes that are then incorporated as part of a larger housing plan that's citywide, that we've got a really good calibration and test of how those work on the ground that people can go and see and touch before a larger code change that citywide comes through.
Do we have any more questions in council chambers?
Don Weiler, local builder. Just one comment first. I do agree that buildable lots for new homes at all price points is important. Without that, buildable lots for homes at all price points, including the higher value homes, that will take over affordable homes that then are substantially improved and then become unaffordable. So I will support the comment that Ally made about that. Currently, ADUs in Bloomington are required to have a deed restriction. There's a primary residence deed restriction, and also that the ADUs cannot be sold separate from the primary residence. And in fact, I just read an article today that talked about that specifically, and it referred to that as a poison pill for the development of ADUs. So I guess the question really is, are those restrictions up for consideration in the city of Bloomington? Thank you.
I'll pass that answer to the mayor while she comes up to the lectern. I'll weigh in 100% in support that anytime we can sell that ADU separately, man, does it help with affordability?
And we're looking at all ways to help affordability, and part of the reason that having owner occupancy tied to an ADU, and one of the strokes of brilliance about Ally's wisdom about the potential to divide these deep lots is that if I want to build an ADU but don't have the cash outright to buy that, to build that ADU, I have to remortgage my entire house to do that. With a lot split, you would be able to get a separate mortgage just to, well, a construction loan converted to a mortgage for that ADU and provide a much more affordable rental product, or potentially an owner-occupied smaller house on that ADU. So it'll be part of our conversation for future potential UDO changes.
And I'll really encourage too, while our next question comes up, everybody that has, especially our builders who are in these codes all the time, who have those really specific questions, we would love to hear from you. With those, I'm going to put our emails back up because, you know, you guys are the experienced ones at this code. And if you've got specific problem areas, we'd love to know about it so we can take a look.
Phil Stapp. I'm sorry, was she done?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Phil Stafford again. You make reference to blocks to 8, 9, and 10 recently, and I wondered if you could clarify what this means for the old Bloomington convalescent structure, which has been identified as a possible police station for the city. I'm not fond of that idea, but I think there's some potential for significant, again, senior housing or intergenerational housing in that building with restoration. So I'm just unclear whether that's in your plan or not.
I'd be happy to take that question. Currently, the Flintlock scope only includes blocks 9 and 10. Block 8 was excluded from this particular project. However, due to the PUD requirement of having at least 5 acres, we had to include it in all of Hopewell South's PUD consideration for right now. The future use of that building has not been decided by the Redevelopment Commission as of yet, but it is a hopeful site of a potential BPD station. Do we have any other questions in person or online?
There are great studies about lights and sirens for emergency vehicles. We still run lights and sirens on all our calls, it seems like, because I live downtown, it's pretty loud. You stick the police department in the neighborhood, lights and siren rules every time they go out, it's going to get interesting. There are good studies saying that doesn't really help. Have we looked at that? Are we considering that as a city? Throw it out there.
We are, and it'll be part of our discussion about relocation of the police department. This is obviously a neighborhood that's had a lot of lights and sirens because it used to be the hospital site, so home to many ambulances. But we've done some workarounds even with the police station where it is now, where they delay turning on those lights and sirens. Other questions here or online? Okay, I'm going to invite Ally to any closing comments you want to make, and then I'll close us out.
I'm excited to work through this with everybody and hope to hear from you on feedback. I'd love for you guys to stay engaged as we go, and we are really hopeful that we'll be able to take a PUD through relatively quickly, and we look forward to comments and support on that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ally, and thanks for your team's work on this. This really is a exciting pivot in innovating on housing for Bloomington, and I'm really thrilled with where Ally and her team have led us in collaboration with our city team and much input from folks here on the ground. We will continue to get that input, and if you saw that timeline, you know that we're really hoping to train developers and get this ready to go by June of next year. So that's our timeline. You can expect to see more details as we know them, and we remain open to questions and comments even after the meeting. Thanks so much for spending your time with us this afternoon.